Welcome to Felony Friday, a presentation of the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here is your host, John Odermatt.
Felons, friends, and freedom lovers, welcome back once again to another edition of Felony Friday right here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. Each and every week, we bring you a brand new episode of Felony Friday. In each episode, we try to shine a light on the broken criminal justice system. And today's episode is no different. For today's episode, I've actually invited back on the show somebody who was on the show recently, back on episode number 32, Anthony Pappas. On episode number 32, Anthony shared his personal story of injustice he encountered through judicial immunity, and I wanted to have Anthony back on. There's some cases that Anthony and I have discussed offline that I think will be really beneficial to helping to shine a light in this area that really has just seen darkness and has not had sufficient attention towards it. So Anthony, I'll be introducing Anthony shortly. Before I do that, this is the 35th episode of Felony Friday. So you know that means you can find show notes to everything we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about a lot of different stories. So you definitely want to take note of this and check out the show notes page at lionsofliberty.com/FF35. Just one more thing before I introduce Anthony, I do want to let you guys know of a brand new way that you can not only support the Lions of Liberty podcast, but you can also help to spread the message of liberty. You can do this by visiting igniteliberty.us. Ignite Liberty, it's a business that I actually started up myself, Ignite Liberty LLC. I started up within the past week. And one of the first things I'm selling there are Make Liberty Great Again snapback hats. They're stylish hats, they're creative designs, they're bold designs, I think. you're really going to enjoy them. But what I've done is I've set up a special offer for Lions of Liberty podcast listeners. And all you're going to have to do, visit igniteliberty.us, pick the design you like, pick your favorite design. There's 2 designs to choose from right now. And at checkout, all you have to do is enter discount code LIBERTY, and you'll get 10% off your order. And a large portion of the proceeds from that purchase are going to go right back into this podcast. And the hats are freaking awesome. Like I said, we have 2 really cool creative designs, eye-catching designs. So please stop by igniteliberty.us, pick out your favorite hat, enter promo code LIBERTY, and check out. It's that simple. Thank you very much. Today, I'm joined once again on Felony Friday by Anthony Pappas. Anthony was previously a guest on this show back on episode number 32. That's where he shared his personal story, his personal nightmare, really, about his experience in civil court for divorce proceedings. Anthony's been a college professor in the Department of Economics and Finance at St. John's University since 1976 and continues today. As I said before, in Anthony's case, the judge fabricated stories, labeled Anthony a violent Class B felon, and compared him to a terrorist in written decisions. And because of this, and this is why I wanted to have Anthony back on today, Anthony has become passionate about and an advocate for reforming judicial immunity, curbing judicial immunity in family court and civil court. So, Anthony, welcome back to Felony Friday.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, thank you for coming back on, Anthony. I got a lot of feedback after the last time you were on the show, after your last appearance. A lot of people were just completely shocked by your story, really. They hadn't really heard anything like it. I think they were glad they heard it and were made aware of it. So I think after we talk through, I think we have 4 stories today, 4 news items today. I think after we talk through these, I think people are going to be even more shocked.
Well, it's a horrible situation for our democracy that the judges can't be held accountable and they are basically functioning like a dictatorship.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And it's systematic, really. And I think this first news story will show that. And this the first news story I'm pretty sure most people have heard of. Once I start talking about it, it'll probably ring a bell and you'll remember it. So this first one, it's known as the case of the shirtless judge. And the reason it's known that way, this a judge in Detroit, Wade McCree, is a married father of 2, and he was nicknamed the shirtless judge, reportedly for bragging about, he sent a picture of himself shirtless to a court deputy in 2010. And he said afterwards, once he was caught doing it, that he had no shame in his game. So that's where he got the label from. That's not really what the news item is about here. The case that really generated a national media attention happened a couple years later. And this case involved a woman by the name of, I'm probably going to butcher this, I think it's Jeannie Lachey Mott. And Judge McCree was presiding over a failure to pay child support from Mott's ex-husband, Robert King. And what happened here is Judge McCree had some sexual relations during the proceedings with Miss Mott. And I guess there were some sexually explicit text messages, and there was also some money exchanged. So their affair was revealed later, and King accused McCree, King is the ex-husband in this case, accused McCree of violating his civil rights, which I think from the looks of it looks like they probably were violated. So this went all the way to the Supreme Court. And maybe, Anthony, maybe you can fill in the gaps here. What happened when it went to the Supreme Court?
Well, basically, the Supreme Court applied this absurd doctrine of judicial immunity. You know, the common person would say, well, what is reflective and shows that a judge is biased and violating your civil rights? He's having sexual relations with one of the persons in his chambers or all over the court and in other places. So that should make him biased. You know, draw analogies with other situations. You know, suppose a college professor is having sexual relations with a student. People would say that's terrible. So here you have a judge. He knows that what he's doing is wrong. The husband sues him for violating civil rights and for the distress that he caused and for, incurring legal fees. And it goes up to the Supreme Court of the United States. And the Supreme Court says you can't sue judges. Basically, they have judicial immunity. And, you'd say, how come? What's going to happen? The legal system is going to collapse if you're allowed to sue Judge McCree in this situation. Well, the principle is what they stand by. We protect the judges. It's necessary for them to have judicial immunity, so you can't sue the judge. They removed him from office, but that doesn't provide, redress of grievances for the husband who was harmed by the judge. It's an acknowledgement that what he was doing is wrong, but he can't be held liable for a portion of the damages and grievances that he has caused an ordinary citizen. So again, the judges are above the law. And, you would think that after 40 years of this doctrine, the Supreme Court would, have some common sense and modify it and, allow some redress of grievances. And again, it would be something that would go through the court system, that it could be, reviewed by the federal courts. It doesn't mean that, the judge is going to be, penalized by a tremendous amount. It would be something that, the courts would have some control over. So they should set up some system of, self-regulation and not continue to adhere to this absurd doctrine of absolute judicial immunity.
I guess the reality of the situation, my main question is there any way to fix this right now, or is the only way to fix this problem of judicial immunity to actually win a case that changes the precedent at the Supreme Court level?
Well, the other way is by, creating public awareness and, having the executive and the legislative branches take action to change the doctrine. It could be something like a constitutional amendment, or, it could be some other, process that the other branches of government would undertake. But the chances of that are slim because there's no outcry about it. So yes, there's a little publicity about it. It did get some news attention, and then it was, dropped like a hot potato. So who's bringing this up and proposing that changes be made or reforms be enacted? The political structure is ignoring it.
Unfortunately, I think the reason that it did get media attention is because of the sexual element to it, and it being a judge and a woman, and the sexual element of little risque behavior. I think that the media thought that would draw people to it and get some clicks on their sites. It didn't draw media attention for the right reason, just for the just abhorrent behavior here and just completely violating this person, Mr. King, Robert King's civil rights. So, we hear about cases like this because they're sexy, but this next case that we're going to talk about, I hadn't heard of until you sent it to me. And I mean, it's worse. I mean, I think it's definitely worse than the shirtless judge case. This next case took place in Long Island, and a father by the name of Rudolph Lipolsky, I'm probably screwing all these names up, but so what this case involved is, the title of this story is "A Father Faults the Judge for His Son's Heroin Overdose." And essentially, the father claims a program that allowed his son to avoid jail time by requiring him to abstain from methadone. Methadone, of course, is a synthetic opioid that is commonly used across the board to get people off of heroin, to get heroin addicts off of heroin onto methadone. And the father is claiming that a program that a judge prescribed wouldn't allow his son to take methadone and drove him back to heroin. And the son was actually doing very well with methadone treatment and was holding down a sales job and had sort of turned his life around. But one slip up, and then the judge seeing this young man, this 28-year-old, once they took his methadone away, he unfortunately went back to heroin, which is really a sad story. And he ended up dying, ended up overdosing. So in a case like this, Anthony, how common is it, or have you seen this in other cases where the judge is essentially acting like almost like a doctor, saying what a person can and cannot put in their body? I've just never heard of anything like this.
Right. And fortunately, as you say, this one was publicized by NBC I-Team investigative report, and that begs the question, how many other situations do we have of, capricious action by the judges? The point they are making as part of the investigative report is that, methadone treatment is allowed, throughout New York State. It would be allowed in, other counties or in another courtroom. It's something that the doctors recommend for treating heroin addiction. I think policemen, when they drive around in the squad cars, carry methadone with them in case they encounter someone who is overdosing on heroin, to give them, instant treatment. So it's something that's regarded in the medical profession as, the proper treatment when you view, heroin as a disease or an addiction. And that's the standard throughout the United States. And now this judge on his own says, well, if you're using a methadone, it's like another crutch, and I don't think you should use it because I'm going to play a doctor. So I'm telling you not to use it. I'm banning it as a treatment for you. Just try to cope with your addiction cold, or on cold turkey or whatever. So Robert Lipolsky wasn't able to do that. He overdosed on heroin and he died. So here we have a life lost. And apparently the judge is still presiding. And, there's been no disciplinary action taken. And, the system just goes along, and it doesn't react to situations where people lose their lives. And, we could have theoretically similar situations. I've become aware of like another situation where a victim was like thrown in jail because he had arrears in terms of legal fees that he was required to pay. And this victim had undergone a heart transplant surgery. And for that, you need a transplant medication to suppress your autoimmune system, which is trying to reject the new heart that you have received. But here again, the judge threw him in jail without the transplant medication, risking his life. And now, that's nowhere in the news. This person fortunately survived, but there could be other cases that we don't hear about. If somebody dies in a prison, they could say, well, a heart attack or blood clot, and they don't investigate further as to what were the circumstances behind the death. Should he have been placed there? Was the treatment brutal and in violation of civil rights? They just close the case, and they don't care about human lives. So again, we don't have oversight over the judicial branch of the government, and it's equivalent to a dictatorship.
It really is unbelievable, that a judge is able to just make these decisions that just have catastrophic impacts. I mean, imagine if a doctor was allowed to, if a doctor made a terrible mistake, during an operation or something, an error, a human error, something that, that they knew they shouldn't have done, and they did something wrong. What if you couldn't sue doctors when they screwed up? And I know it's not always easy to sue doctors. I'm sure doctors would like not to be able to be sued, but it's the same thing. I mean, if somebody has your life in their hands, you got to be able to hold them accountable. And it's just incredible that judges are able to operate in this manner.
Right. You could also draw an analogy, I guess, with a priest. If, someone has a heroin addiction and goes to a priest, and the priest says, don't use methadone, just pray to God, I believe you would be able to, sue the priest. So again, that shows the judges are the only category of citizens or individuals that have this type of immunity, and they, don't seem to be ready to modify it.
Incredible. And, it's almost like as these stories go along, I don't know if they keep on getting worse, but we have another tough one, another rough example here. And this one, title of this story is A daughter lied when she was younger and sent her father to prison for rape, and admits to lying when she was younger, and the father is still in prison today. So the article here that I'll post on the show notes page, this was a news story back in 2013. The daughter in this story, Shania Kelly, says that in 1997 she falsely accused her father, Daryl Kelly, of raping her.
Excuse me, I don't really think it was rape. I think it would be more in the category of sexual abuse, that she was saying that the father touched her no-no spot, or meaning, I guess her vagina, or that's how it was referred to.
Yeah, what happened here, I guess, Anthony, is the mother in this case, Charade, I think is her name, was on drugs and just out of her mind, and for whatever reason was pressuring the daughter to say that the father was touching her inappropriately. And this went all the way. I guess the mother then went to the police, and the daughter said that that her father had been touching her, and I'm sure that prosecutors were heavily involved crafting the story as well. The father ends up getting arrested, ends up getting convicted, and then years later, so this is in 97, Years later, I don't have it. Actually, no, just a couple months later, I think. Yeah, a couple months later. Is that correct, Anthony?
Right. The little girl, a couple of months later, recanted her testimony. Now she was living with her grandmother, so she was away from like the mother's influence. But then, in the original trial, the person was convicted on both the testimony of the little daughter and the mother, who accused the father of inappropriate touching. The little girl recanted a little bit in a short period of time, but then we have this interview by Lester Holt from NBC Nightly News, where he is saying that ultimately, many years later, the daughter and the mother, who were the witnesses testifying about inappropriate contact, they are both recanting their testimony. And, the mother is verifying that, she threatened to beat the girl with a belt if the girl didn't say, "He touched me in my no-no spot." And so the mother is saying, yes, I threatened the little girl to give false testimony, and I gave false testimony myself. So now you would think the person would be set free, because, the two people testifying against him are saying we both lied. So now, in a bizarre twist of fate, the legal system says, well, we don't believe you now. You're lying when you're telling us this, 15 years later. You were telling the truth earlier, 15 years ago, and we'll just keep the father in jail. So
unbelievable. Yeah. So how has he not been able to at least get an appeal of some kind?
Well, again, I'm not an expert on this, but it goes that, we can make whatever decisions we want. And, if you're not fortunate enough to have someone sensible deal with your situation, you stay in jail. And, there are many situations where innocent people are convicted, and then, they wind up being released on the basis of, DNA evidence, or some people recant the testimony, or, say, we were coerced into testifying this way. Here, when the two individuals are now, adults and testifying years later, for some reason, the court is concluding that they're not telling the truth, and the father should stay in jail.
It's amazing, because what motive would they have all of a sudden to change their story and then hold to that consistently for, we're going on 20 years now that the father's been in jail. And since almost the very beginning, just a couple months after the conviction, they've said that they made it up. They've recanted their story, and they've consistently held to that. And the daughter has even was able to get visitation rights to visit her father in jail. And the father does not hold the daughter personally responsible, which makes sense, as she was basically forced into making this story up by her mother. So it's just an incredibly sad story. He was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison. So I don't know if that means he'll get out soon, or if he's a good behavior in prison or not, but hopefully for his own sake, he gets out soon.
Well, again, we could argue that we have a system where the primary purpose seems to be punishment, whether it's justified or not, and the concern about, human lives and compassion and fairness, those concerns fall by the wayside.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. And these stories just are really a slap in the face, and hopefully should wake a lot of people up. This next story you sent me recently, Anthony, and I'm familiar with it. happened in my home state here. I'm in Pennsylvania, and it's known as the Kids for Cash scandal. And this unfolded, I think, about maybe 8 years ago, back in 2008. And what it was is there were kickbacks being paid between prison operators and judges to get the judges to sentence juveniles to for-profit youth centers, juvenile detention centers. The judges involved in this by the name of Judge Mark, these names are all terrible, Judge Mark Ciarvelli and Judge Michael Conahan. Nobody can be just Smith or any easy name like that. Anyway, they ended up getting convicted eventually. But what they were doing, they were sending these kids to these juvenile detention centers for just some very minor things like trespassing in vacant buildings or shoplifting DVDs at Walmart, or one was even for just mocking a principal on MySpace, sending these kids away to detention centers just for a little bit of a kickback. Just completely, where is the morality here? There's absolutely none. All they saw was money, I guess. So what eventually happened here, Anthony, and do you know how they got caught?
Well, I believe there was an FBI investigation that somehow uncovered the venality or the bribery that was occurring, and that enabled, the FBI to bring charges. But the commentary I would make on this would be that if they had just been capricious, if the judge just said, well, I think the younger generation should show more respect. So if they curse in class, they go to detention for 4 years. Or if they mock the principal on MySpace, they go to detention for 4 years. And I just feel like doing that, right? If he had not accepted any money, but, just had this, viewpoint about what were appropriate sentences, he could have destroyed lives as he did. And, this involved, 2,000, juveniles. And in that situation, he would have had immunity. If he wasn't getting bribes. Again, the principle is the judge can be capricious. And, before this was exposed, this was going on for a long period of time. There must have been, parents or people that felt, hey, why is my child going to detention for 4 years or some period of time, for trespassing on school property when it's empty, or he's going to detention for, cursing in class, or, throwing an eraser or whatever. So these sentences were unduly harsh. There was no way to review them or, have them reconsidered. And, the judges are just ruining the lives of hundreds and thousands of juveniles. If you send a juvenile to detention, he doesn't complete the school with his classmates. He doesn't, graduate when he's supposed to. And it creates, distress. There was a case where one young man committed suicide because of, the fact that the detention interfered, with his plans, to graduate and attend college, whatever, it delayed them or, somehow upsets, your plans, or whether to graduate or get a job or go to college. And the young man committed suicide. Again, something totally unnecessary. And the damage to hundreds and thousands of other juveniles could have been avoided. And if there was some sensible review process, and where somebody could, remove this judge from office just for being, off the wall in terms of the sentences he was giving out. He would still be on the bench if he had not taken bribes. So he'd still be destroying lives and being protected by, judicial immunity.
Yeah, it really is a good point that you bring up regarding, these judges would be able to operate like this. The only thing that got them in trouble was taking money. And one of the reasons that I do this podcast and got me interested in criminal justice reform, especially nonviolent drug reform, is a friend of mine was arrested in Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania. And there was a judge that he's been known for completely just over-sentencing for marijuana crimes. And my friend in this circumstance was selling a little bit of marijuana, and there was an undercover cop that he was selling to, and the undercover cop kept coming back to him, getting more and more and more greater amounts to get to the point of being able to charge a felony. And when they did finally move in to arrest my friend, they found absolutely no drugs. He didn't have any paraphernalia. And when they arrested the other people that were associated with him, they all had drugs, they all had paraphernalia. And my friend ended up getting the harshest sentence just because the judge, undercover cop, was able to get the most amount of a sale from him when it was evident that he was not dealing drugs. He just thought he was helping out this undercover cop. But this guy ended up serving a year in prison, various prisons around Pennsylvania, and this was many years ago. And I think he's still on probation today. Just for selling some plants, which is just ridiculous. But I just thought that there was a little bit of correlation here with this story.
Yeah.
And if a judge is anti-drug, they can, if you can get arrested for the same crime in one part of a state and get arrested, a friend of yours gets arrested in another part of the state, and one judge could let you off with a little bit of a fine, and one judge could send you to prison.
Right, and picking up on that, these sentencing disparities are often, utilized as bargaining points in terms of plea deals. We know that 95% of the criminal cases don't go to trial; they are resolved through plea deals. So if you get an attorney or a public defender, they could tell you, well, you're going to go before a hanging judge. He has a reputation for hanging people or, treating them brutally. So you better plea that you're guilty because, you don't want to annoy him or irritate him or, take the risk that instead of, pleading to a lower charge, you're going to be found guilty of, the higher level offense, and this judge will, hang you or, sentence you for a long period of time. So these disparities in the temperament or, the sentencing or the attitudes of the judges is, part of this process of bargaining and putting pressure on people to, give up their rights and, to suffer terrible consequences, which, they don't deserve. So the whole system needs to be reformed in many respects. Criminal courts, the civil courts, and, this doctrine of judicial immunity should be a top priority. And again, where are the politicians that are raising this issue? It's an election year, and no politician that I'm aware of is raising it. Senate candidates, congressional candidates, presidential candidates, people running for state legislatures. There seems to be a conspiracy of silence about this.
One guy who I know is raising it and will raise it, and you know him too, is Libertarian Senate candidate in New York, Alex Merced. I meant to ask you about this last time. How did you meet Alex? You were running for the Green Party ticket, is that correct?
Well, yes, but the way I met him was at the CNN town hall for the Libertarian candidates, Gary Johnson and William Weld. So they asked people to, submit a set of questions or indicate that they wanted to attend the CNN town hall. So I was selected to go to the town hall meeting, and during the break or at the end of the show, you socialized and talked to the other people that were at the meeting, and that's how I met Alex.
Well, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, Anthony. Unfortunately, there's not more people doing this out there. There's not more people shining a light on this. Hopefully, with having you on the show again, reviewing these crimes, this will wake more people up. Hopefully, people share this show. Just wanted to give you a chance to say the last word if you have anything else you want to add.
Well, the longer people delay in changing the system, you're just going to have more tragedies. People will commit suicide. Children will be harmed. It's, really a very atrocious situation. And it's incomprehensible, how in the 21st century, when we profess to have a system that provides justice, we are weighed down by this odious decision, from the 1970s. And, as I say, everybody is probably aware of it. Attorneys are aware of it. How many people go to law school and become aware of the decision? And it's comparable to, the Dred Scott decision. African Americans are not human beings, they are property. Here we have something that morally and ethically is equivalent, and in the 21st century, it's tolerated. So it's just incomprehensible. So, but again, let's try to raise awareness and change the system for the better.
Well, thank you once again for coming on Felony Friday, Anthony.
Thank you for having me.
This was another great show with Anthony Pappas today. I really want to thank Anthony for coming back on to Felony Friday to share and to talk about these important stories. During Anthony's previous appearance on the show, back on episode number 32, and I'll link to that in the show notes as well. As you know, people who listened, and if you haven't listened, please go back and listen to it. He shared his story, his personal story of how he's been pushed around and lied about by a judge who just really simply didn't like him. Now, a lot of people would be demoralized by this type of behavior, by these types of circumstances. And a lot of people would choose to deal with this by simply, dealing with this nightmare in private. But Anthony is not like a lot of people. Anthony has chosen to use this experience to spread awareness about the injustice of judicial immunity and to shine a light on this abhorrent and really just an abhorrent behavior, but also just completely unfair balance of power. There is no semblance of equality under the law with this type of behavior, and it really has to stop. And the only way we're going to stop it is by gaining awareness and educating people that it does exist. Now, we talked about quite a few cases today, and many of the cases my listeners might have been familiar with. If you're not familiar with them, I encourage you, please go to the show notes page, check them out, read about them, and learn more. Judicial immunity is a troubling thing. Most people have no idea that it's going on, so please, share this episode with others. I always encourage that. Please like the Lions of Liberty on Facebook and Twitter. That kind of makes it easier to share it. You'll see it come out on our social media, and you can just retweet it or forward it on Facebook. So please do that. If you haven't yet joined the Lions of Liberty forum on Facebook, I really do want to encourage you to check that out. The Facebook group is growing rapidly, and Mark Clare posted something last week in there, posted something talking about just how proud he was of that forum group, how proud he was of how people were interacting with each other, being respectful of each other. And I wholeheartedly agree with him. It's really become a nice little group a nice little discussion group. and little group. We're over 500 people now, so it's not little by any stretch of the imagination. There's just always new points of view being brought up. People are not being condescending to each other. You can join the Lions of Liberty Forum by going on Facebook, typing Lions of Liberty Forum in the search bar there. You can contact me if you have any questions at felonyfriday@lionsofliberty.com. Pass along any stories you want me to talk about, any guests you want me to have on. I read all my email and I try to respond to all of it, so don't be shy. I think that's it for today, guys. I really want to thank you for joining me. Just one more reminder. Please, you can really help out the show by going to igniteliberty.us, looking around at the options of hats we have there, of Make Liberty Great Again hats, picking out a hat, going to checkout and entering discount code Liberty for 10% off of your purchase. A major portion of those profits are going to go right back into the Lions of Liberty, so you're really going to help the show out. As always, guys, thank you for listening. This is John Odermatt signing off. Always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.